Good morning. I am Miriam Epskamp, the Director of Religious Education for this congregation. This morning was envisioned as a conversation between our minister, the Reverend G, and our special guest, Wendy Fields. And our Reverend G came down with the flu, and so I am sitting in and just winging it. So I apologize in advance. It's not going to be as lovely as it would have been if Reverend G is here, but we are going to power ahead. Before we get started, I want to do a proper introduction of our guest, Wendy Fields. Retired from Kalamazoo County government after 39 years of service in the Health and Human Services Department. She is involved in the community through volunteerism, advocacy, education, and the overall fight for equality, equity, and justice. Ms. Fields is a member of the Galilee Baptist Church, a life member of the Metropolitan Kalamazoo branch of the NAACP, a member of the Northside Ministerial Alliance. She serves on the Cradle Kalamazoo Steering Committee. She's on Isaac's Leadership Board and on the board of the Douglas Community Center. She is a proud mother of two, a grandmother of three, and soon to be a great-grandmother. Wendy's passion is simply to help others through truth, empowerment, and advocacy. Welcome, Wendy. So Reverend G asked that I set up our conversation today with some readings from the Hebrew Bible and from Christian scriptures. So here we go. So both Wendy and I are not as educated and knowledgeable about the scripture, so we're also winging it here too. But the reading first is from Nehemiah 4. And so the book of Nehemiah just describes this man, Nehemiah. He was a governor of Judea during the Persian Empire and the Second Temple period. That's about 465 to 424 BC. And so there was Judea, and he was the governor. And then there was lots of other little kingdoms around Judea that also had their own governors. And Nehemiah's off in Persia with the emperor, as one likes to do, having a good time. And he gets called back to Judea because the walls around Jerusalem are falling down. Now, the other governors of the other little kingdoms around Jerusalem are kind of happy this is happening and are giving him a hard time. Their names are Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, and they get mentioned in this rather long reading. So, now you know who they are. When Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble burned as they are?" Tobiah, the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, "What are they building? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down that wall of stones." "Hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders." So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half of its height, for the people worked with all their heart. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs to Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. They plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. but we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Meanwhile, the people of Judea said, "The strength of the laborers is giving out. There is so much rubble, we cannot rebuild this wall." Also, our enemies said, "Before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them, and we will kill them and put an end to this work." Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, "Wherever you turn, they will attack us." Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall and at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords and their spears and their bows. After I looked over things, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, "Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons, your daughters, your wives, your homes." When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to our own work. From that day on, half of my men did their work, while the other half were equipped with spears and shields and bows and armor. The officers posted themselves behind the people of Judah, who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, "The work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. When you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us." So we continued the work, with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn till the stars came out. At that time I also said to the people, "Have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night so they can serve us as guards by night and workers by day." And neither I, nor my brothers, nor my men, nor the guards with me took off our clothes. Each had his weapon, even when they went for water. The next reading is from Matthew 21. Jesus entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. "It is written," he said to them, "My house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers." So, with those words in mind, Wendy, as someone who has lived your entire life in Kalamazoo and have seen the pendulum swing and has seen improvements and then things drawn back as far as equity and justice and equality, how are you feeling right now?
Well, so I serve a good and just God. God has always taken care of me in everything that I've done and asked, even when I didn't know that he was doing it. So, excuse me, as one that grew up in Kalamazoo, on the north side of Kalamazoo, the community in which I grew up in was very diverse. And so we had African Americans, Dutch, Hispanics in the area in which I grew up in. And so in my neighborhood, that's what it looked like. And so I did not realize, and even though we knew that racism was there, I did not know it was there, and I did not experience racism until busing came into play, and I was bused to South Junior High, which at that time was predominantly white, and so there was a lot of pushback from there. And so I think it was a culture shock for all of us that came out of the neighborhood, because we went to Lincoln Elementary School, all of us, our whole life, and so then we were uprooted and saw that. So when I think about some of what has been read, once that blinder is taken off your eyes, you can't put it back on. And so, having seen that and experienced what I did at South, I'm sorry, what I experienced at South, it further was perpetuated when I went to Shorter, Alabama with my girlfriend to her father's funeral. And we went to a small grocery store there. Well, it wasn't a grocery store, it was a small store in the, out there in the rural area. And so I ordered what I wanted and had my money in my hand, and I outstretched my hand to give it to the clerk there, and she just stood there and looked at me. I was about 11, and she just looked at me, and I looked at her, hand outstretched, and so the little girl that lived there said to me, "You have to put the money on the counter." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, she's not going to take it out of your hand." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, that's just the way it is." And it didn't feel right in my gut. And I said, "Well, then I'm not buying it." And so we left the store. Little did I know, not growing up in that community, that I guess I did a major faux pas, because when we got back to her house, we were fine, but probably about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we were awakened and told that we had to leave because we were uppity Northerners, and it was causing issues for the family that lived there. So as you grow and as you look at things, you see what racism is, you see what biases are, and it becomes more and more apparent. My mom was always concerned for me because she said my mouth was too big because of very outspoken, and I'm very direct. And so she, but also knew, in her words, I was special. So she never tried to stop me from being who I was and who I am. So even with that, I lived a few blocks away from Van Avery's drugstore. I don't know if you heard about that boycott that took place there. So it was the pharmacists that we would go to, and they would serve African Americans and the Latinx citizens there, but they would not hire anybody that was black or not white. And so the boycott happened, right? And the boycott happened, and so that was changed, but it was changed too late because when he finally did decide to hire, it was too late. He had lost a lot of business, so he ended up having to close the store. And so it was those things, one after another. I remember being at South Junior High, and again, just the rioting and stuff that had taken place. It was culture shock, and we were traumatized because we never seen anything like that. So again, as I grew, going to training, going to different anti-racism training, meeting different people, because I'm a people person, you learn more. And I think about that adage where, you seek to understand versus being understood, because not perfect, because trust me, I got a temper and attitude. So, you live and learn, but I think about even that in the work that we have to do, because the bottom line is that we need each other, and it's not just that simple, because we can sit here and do the kumbaya thing and sing it and talk about what it is, but what is most important is being intentional about the work. So, as I go places and I say, we can sit here, we can talk about it, we can sing about it, but what do we do about it when we go home? What do we do about it when we're in our own spaces, when nobody else is looking? What do we do about it when it's just one-on-one? Do we then stand up and speak what we say in a group such as this? Or do we call people on their stuff when they're simply wrong. And we think a lot of times, I was saying to Miriam, even when we were sitting here, Sunday, they said 11 o'clock, but we start church earlier now these days. We have 2 services. But it's the most segregated hour of the day. And for me, that's a whole lot of silo work. So, and it's fine that we have to do that and be where we are, but it's okay too to visit other churches. It's okay too to go and seek out people that are different. Politicians do it a lot, and I just flat out told them, I was approached last year, oh, I'd like to come to your church. Come to my church anytime. I'm not going to invite you to my church just because you're running for office. You know, so if you're intentional about the work, we make it work. I don't need you, and you don't need me to take you to a place where it might be owned by people of color. That's something we can all do individually. And the more we expose ourselves, the more that we are intentional about learning about other people, learning about other cultures, the easier it is. It's like when you think about geese, a flock of geese, and you notice that they are in a triangle. So the one in the front is the one that's pushing back the most air to carry the other one. But they work together because when that one's tired or when that one goes to the back so it can just cruise on the air that the other one is generating. And that's what this has got to be like. So when we talk about even what was read, it's about being on watch, but also being prayerful. And we have to do that in order to gain and be what God and who God has called us to be. So just to come to church to hear it, if we're not intentional about God's work and doing what He's called us to do, what are we doing? And that's all of us. What are we doing? What earthly good are we? My mom would always say, you know, sometimes we can be so heavenly minded that we know earthly good. And so when we think about all the things that we could do and can do and should do when nobody else is looking but God, that for me is what it looks like. So even when and if you think, and I don't know how many know the history of the NAACP, but even when the NAACP was started, it was actually 3 white people that said, because of the race riots that had taken place in Springfield, Illinois, where blacks were uprooted and murdered and beaten and their neighborhoods burned down, it was 3 whites that said, this is not right, this cannot happen. So they got together then with others of color, W.E.B. Du Bois and some other, Ida B. Wells. They got together, and so the NAACP, with that few people, was started in 1909 in New York. But that's what working together looks like. That's what standing up for what's wrong looks together, and there just never is a wrong time to do the right thing. So
in this time where it feels like we are definitely going backwards as far as equality and equity is concerned. I mean, you hear the news about groups at West Point being disbanded and monuments being covered and executive orders that are pulling back on some of the progress that was made in the civil rights movement. What do you think we are called on to do in this moment? When I hear the readings, there's a lot of, militancy, both in Jesus saying, enough, this has to stop, and in the first reading, it was definitely, we're going to fight for our right to be here. And I think definitely from Reverend G's point of view, they're feeling very fearful in this moment, having grown up under authoritarian government, being in a marginalized community, and I know that that fear pushes us to do things that maybe we we might regret. So what do you think we're called to do in this moment?
I think, I think that we are called to do what God has always told us to do. And again, I'm not a Bible scholar or anything like that, but what I do live out, I try to live out, is the Ten Commandments. It's very simple. It's very basic, you know. It's talking about love. It talks about forgiveness. It talks about honoring God and all of that. But prayer without work is dead. So, yes, there are things that we have to do. And again, some of that is just being intentional about it. Some of that is educating ourselves and others about it. The other thing for me, I honestly believe in my hearts of heart, if people simply think about what they want for themselves, want it for others. If it's a freedom that or a privilege that you have, want it for me, want it for others. Because once we do that, I think it would be easy, but it's not that easy. It is not that easy. It has to be intentional. It has to be standing up for somebody that is weaker or afraid. I'll tell anybody, God does not give me the spirit of fear. So sometimes I'm standing by myself. But I have to say and do what he's called me to do. And I think that's what we all have to do. And whether that's voting so that laws are fair, I tell people, if votes didn't matter, why do they work so hard to keep people from voting? Voting matters. So to hear the rhetoric about why you shouldn't and all the things that they want to put in place to prevent or make it difficult for people to vote, ask yourself why. Ask yourself and others, what you want that put on you. You know, there's some countries, not countries, states, that have voting laws so that, you have a felony record, you can't vote. We are really blessed here in Michigan. I think we are one of the most progressive states that there is, and some of the ones that are in place make it easier for barriers to be removed so that people can vote. I know we're able to go into the jail and register voters there as long as they're not serving a sentence. They can, and if they have 20 felony records, as long as they're not serving a sentence, they can vote. The absentee vote, the same day voting, it's laws. It's making sure the policies are right and fair, not just fair for some. It's like even on, when I worked on my job, there were some things that I saw, and yeah, I called the monitor. I did everything from even filing a complaint against the county administrator. And he didn't like it, but it changed. So that's what it looks like. And we can do those things to help each other. It's just, and we need to think about what kind of future do we want for our children, our grandchildren? Does it help? Does it hurt? Does it cause harm? Just because a few, it worked for them, what about everybody else? That's what we have to think about. We have to ask those questions to say, is this fair? And if it's not, would you want it for yourselves? Because if the answer is no, then there's just something that we need to do about it. And it's calling our representatives and our congressmen and doing all. It's a lot of work, and it's tiring. But if we all did our part in it, it would not be so. We can come here and we can come to church, and it's not just here. It's everywhere. We were at the Women's March, and I'm listening to them, and yeah. But what now? And and this is what I tell my executive committee. There's so much going on in the world. It becomes so overwhelming and it becomes scary. And you're like, well, what can I do? If you don't do anything but it's nice to one person, that's a start. What do we do? What can we do? It's being very intentional. Marches are good. It brings attention. But what now? And those are the things that we have to ask ourselves. But it is about the work. It is, we can't, we're all older. I mean, I'm 70. You get tired. But we also have to bring them up and bring up those behind us and educate them and not be afraid to talk about the truth. You know, it's like Black history. Black history is American history. It is, and we have to educate. So when you've got a system that wants to remove some of that stuff that honestly cripples us all and causes harm, it's like, what are we doing? What can I do? And if it's nothing else but speaking up and then doing, because we can talk all day long, but it definitely means taking action in some form or fashion. And that might just be calling your senator or getting a group of people together, but do the work. Educate yourselves. Find out what that's what we all have to do, because we think we know, and some of us have grown up certain ways, and then you find out, that wasn't true. And I just want better for other people. I want better for my kids. I want better for this world. We look at climate control and those that don't believe in, yeah, we see it. I mean, the southern states having that much snow, it's real. And so if it's nothing else but recycling, we all have work to do. And if all of us do a little bit of it, it could get better.
I think of that first reading, when your values, your central values, are under attack, it's kind of advising you to go night and day and don't take time to change your clothes. And if you're working during the day and you're guarding at night, how do we find balance going forward? What advice do you have there?
If we don't take care of self, we can't take care of anybody else. It's as simple as that. And I remember I have a really large family, right? So one Thanksgiving, it was a few years ago, one Thanksgiving, I told my daughter, I said, there's too many of us, I just don't feel like doing it. So I went and got a hotel room for 2 days. Nobody knew where I was but my daughter. And I told her where I was because I didn't want her thinking somebody kidnapped me. And I didn't show up. I went out Black Friday shopping, and I went back to my hotel room, and I stayed in my jammies all day. So I'm very intentional about taking care of myself, because what I do know is that we can't do it all. We need each other. We have to recharge. You have to take time for yourself. When I went to Africa, I turned off my phone, and I called to say I made it safely, and I turned off my phone. No email, no text message, anything. And so took all my pictures, and I got back home, and my daughter said, well, why did you turn off your phone? If anything had happened, how am I going to get back anyway? So I might as well be at peace, right? And not let anybody interrupt my peace, because I couldn't just jump on the plane and get back. But it really is being intentional, and you can't feel guilty about doing it. Even if it's our children, and my kids will tell you, and I told them when they were little, two things I told them. Once, each of you get a free get-out-of-jail card. So that means anything you do, I'm there. Each of you get one of those. And my daughter never used hers, my son did. And the other thing is, it's okay to say no. It just simply is okay to say no. And we don't have to take on all the stuff of our children. We do the best that we can, and it's even at work. They know me. If I took one sick day, I got smarter as I got older. So if I went somewhere and I took Monday off, so you can come back on a Tuesday. Well, as I got older, I started coming back on a Wednesday, and then I came back on Thursday. So I only had to work 2 days in that week and then came back. But I was very intentional about taking and using sick time, and I really don't feel guilty when I have to say no. My pastor will tell you the same thing. I just don't. And I don't think that we need to beat up on ourselves for taking care of ourselves, because, and if there are any of you out there that's a caretaker, being a caregiver, that's a lot of work. It is draining, and you just have to. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. There simply is. Disconnect from the phone, disconnect from everything. Make sure you exercise, get yourself a massage. I talk and laugh with God all the time because I think he's a great comedian. And I laugh a lot. I like music. But yeah, it's self-care. It's just essential. I have seen people that have taken care of significant others, and the caretaker passes, and the one that they were taking care of still here. Take care of self by whatever means is necessary. You really have to do that. Find your joy. Find your peace. I have a motto, the plaque I used to have on my desk, and it simply says, "I seek peace, but I prepare for war." So, and I think that's what we have to do. I'm looking, but I seek that peace and that joy.
Yeah, I think those walls of Jericho were built like in 50 days and then they were done. So I think we're in for the long haul, and we really need to pace ourselves as we're working for justice and equity, working to defend our values, our faith in the world. So it is, we're running out of time, and you've given us a lot to think about as far as building community, going into spaces that we may not feel comfortable with. Don't wait till you're being asked. Come up, show up, and how to ground ourselves as we work for building the beloved community that benefits us all. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. This is awesome. I also like the calmness of your service. Ours is a little different. You have to come and visit sometimes. We have a 7:30 service and we have a 10 o'clock service, and so I appreciate the music because our songs can last 15, 20 minutes. so it's different, and I appreciate this. Thank you.